What if your purpose in life was not to be the center, but to point others to something greater? What if the most powerful role you could play is not being recognized, but helping others see the truth? And what if clarity about who you are begins with knowing who you are not? There is a moment in the Gospel of John that feels quiet, almost simple at first, but it carries a powerful message about identity, purpose, and truth. In John 1:19-28, we meet a man who had every opportunity to claim attention, yet chose something completely different. His name was John. Not the author of the Gospel, but John the Baptist. At that time, there was growing curiosity about him. People were talking, crowds were coming. Something was happening in the wilderness that couldn't be ignored. His message was strong. His presence was unusual. And naturally, questions began to rise. Who is he? The religious leaders in Jerusalem wanted answers. So they sent priests and Levites to ask him directly. Who are you? It sounds like a simple question, but behind it is something deeper. They weren't just asking for a name. They were trying to understand his identity, his authority, his role. And John's response is striking. He did not hesitate. He did not leave room for misunderstanding. He confessed freely, "I am not the Messiah." Think about that moment. He had influence. He had attention. He had people listening. If he wanted to elevate himself, this was the perfect opportunity, but he didn't. Instead, he made something clear right away. He was not the one they were looking for. This kind of clarity is rare, because in a world where people often seek recognition, validation, and status, it can be tempting to step into roles that were never meant for us. But John didn't do that. He knew who he was, and just as importantly, he knew who he was not. The questioning didn't stop there. They asked him, "Then who are you? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" Again, he answered, "No." At this point, you can almost feel their frustration building. They needed an answer to bring back. They needed something clear, something definable. So they asked again, "Who are you? Give us an answer to take back to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" And this is where John reveals something powerful. He doesn't define himself by title or position. He doesn't claim status or importance. Instead, he says, "I'm the voice of one calling in the wilderness. Make straight the way for the Lord." A voice, not the message itself, but the one carrying it. Not the destination, but the sign pointing toward it. There is something deeply meaningful in that. John understood that his purpose was not to draw attention to himself, but to prepare the way for someone greater. He was a messenger, a guide, a voice in the wilderness. And that phrase, "in the wilderness," matters because wilderness is not a place of comfort. It is not where people naturally gather. It is a place of isolation, of rawness, of honesty. And yet, that is where his voice was heard. Sometimes, the most important messages don't come from the center of attention. They come from unexpected places, from quiet spaces, from moments that are not polished or perfect. John's message was not about himself. It was about preparation. Make straight the way for the Lord. In other words, get ready. Something is coming. Someone is coming. And everything is about to change. But the religious leaders were still focused on something else. They asked, "Why then do you baptize if you are not the Messiah, nor Elijah, nor the prophet?" They were trying to understand his authority. What gives him the right to do what he's doing? And John answers with humility and clarity. "I baptize with water," he says, "but among you stands one you do not know." This is where the message becomes even more powerful, because while they were asking questions, while they were analyzing, while they were trying to define things, the very one they were looking for was already present, but they didn't recognize him. "Among you stands one you do not know." That line carries weight, because it reveals something about human nature. We can be so focused on expectations, on titles, on appearances that we miss what is right in front of us. We look for something grand, something obvious, but sometimes truth arrives quietly, unnoticed, unrecognized, and unless we are paying attention, we miss it. John continues, "He is the one who comes after me, the straps of whose sandals I am not worthy to untie." In that culture, untying someone's sandals was considered a low task, something done by servants. And yet John says he is not even worthy of that. This is not insecurity. This is humility grounded in truth. He understands the greatness of the one who is coming. And in that understanding, he places himself correctly, not above, not equal, but below. There is something freeing about that. Because when you understand your role, you don't have to compete. You don't have to compare. You don't have to prove yourself. You simply fulfill your purpose. And John's purpose was clear: to prepare the way, to point, to direct attention away from himself and towards something greater. This is a powerful lesson for today. Because we live in a world that constantly tells us to build our image, to promote ourselves, to be seen, to be known. But John's example shows a different path. A path where purpose is not about being the center, but about being faithful to the role you've been given. A path where identity is not built on recognition, but on truth. A path where impact comes not from drawing attention to yourself, but from pointing others to what truly matters. And here's something important to understand. John was not insignificant. He had a role that mattered deeply. Without preparation, people might not have been ready. Without a voice in the wilderness, the way might not have been clear. His role was essential, but it was not ultimate. And there's a difference. Sometimes we confuse importance with centrality. We think that to matter, we have to be the main focus. But that's not always true. Sometimes the most important roles are the ones that prepare the way for something else. The ones that make space, the ones that guide, the ones that point. John embraced that role fully. He didn't resist it. He didn't try to turn it into something else. He accepted it. And in doing so, he became exactly who he was meant to be. This raises an important question. Do you know who you are? Not just your name, your job, or your achievements, but your purpose. And just as importantly, do you know who you are not? Because clarity often comes not just from what you say yes to, but from what you say no to. John said no to being the Messiah, no to being Elijah, no to being the prophet, and in those no's he made space for the right yes. I am a voice. Simple, clear, focused. There is power in that kind of clarity, because it removes confusion, it removes pressure. It allows you to walk confidently in your role without trying to be something else. And maybe that's something many people struggle with today. Trying to be everything, trying to meet every expectation, trying to fit into roles that were never meant for them. But John's example invites a different approach. Know your role, embrace it, live it fully, and trust that it matters. Even if it's not the spotlight, even if it's not recognized by everyone, even if it feels like a voice in the wilderness. Because sometimes the wilderness is exactly where truth is needed most. And sometimes the voice that seems small is the one that prepares the way for something greater than anyone can imagine. The passage ends by noting that all this happened in Bethany, on the other side of the Jordan, where John was baptizing. A specific place, a real moment in time. But the message goes beyond that moment. It continues to speak, it continues to challenge, it continues to invite reflection. Who are you? What is your role? Are you trying to be something you're not? Or are you willing to embrace the purpose you've been given, even if it looks different from what you expected? Because there is freedom in truth, freedom in clarity, freedom in knowing your place in a larger story. And when you step into that, something shifts. You stop striving, you stop comparing, you start living with intention, with focus, with purpose. Just like a voice in the wilderness, clear, steady, pointing the way. Thank you for watching this video. If this message spoke to you, take a moment to like, follow the channel, and share this video with someone who may need to hear it.